Sandwiched between China and Russia, Mongolia is a land that for nearly all of its history has not been a place of cities or even towns, but of nomads farming and grazing for a living. That is, when they were not busy conquering other countries. Just about every inch of this landlocked nation is remote. This 14-year-old boy lives a day-and-a-half's drive to the west of Mongolia's only city. He's going to have a busy day. Some customers have arrived, so he's driving his stock into camp. His mother will oversee today's work.
Тэр мал нь байдаг хүн ирж мал зарсан. Энэ сая хүмүүст л зарсан юм шиг байлээ. Малаа зарж тэр нэг олон юм ачаад байсан хүнд бол тэр 5-6 ямаагараа нэг адуу авч тэрийг авч юу яах юм шиг.
But before they can be traded, the goats have to be caught. Little has changed in these practices for many hundreds of years. The economy here is still ticking over using barter as a form of transaction, the same as it has for generations. Dorjdari and her husband began herding in the area 10 years ago. They now have 3 children, and life's fortunes pretty much turn on the quality of the seasons.
Цагаал урандулаа сайхан өвөл хавартаа гайгүй байх юм бол малч өсөөлээ. Шуурга зууд турхан болох юм бол тэгээд одооны малч ирнэ. Хүйтэн л дэсвэргүй болцсон юм байна.
Though this is anything but an easy existence, there will always be those who want to work the land here. However, the numbers are dwindling with each harsh winter or crippling drought. What's more, Mongolian agriculture is now being swamped by a new industry, and wherever you go, it's not far away. In a nearby area, the new Mongolian economy is creeping in, and you'd have to say in this spot, it's certainly not pretty. As far as the local herders can see, this is the face of a mining boom that looks set to sweep the country. Small-scale gold hunting that's destroying a river valley with little or no rehabilitation. But relatively modest operations like this are really just a sideshow, because the direction Mongolia is heading in is big mining. This country is in the midst of a mining-led transformation, and at the forefront is the flagship Tolgoi project. Run by Australia's Rio Tinto, it will open in the coming months and become one of the biggest copper mines on the planet. It alone is to account for more than 30% of Mongolia's entire GDP. Yet only a few years ago, hardly anybody had heard of this place.
Yeah. This is where it all started, eh?
Geophysicist SANGORJ, who like nearly all Mongolians goes by just one name, was part of a small exploration team camping out at Turquoise Hill, or in Mongolian, Tolgoi.
Same location.
Of course, every geologist or geoscientist dream to discover something big, you know. But at that time, we were so busy and we did not just imagine how it would be big, but we were very excited.
What they were sitting on was a very rich deposit indeed, as you can see from the naked eye on the original samples.
To participate in the discovery of such a big deposit, it's how to say, I don't know. I'm feeling very proud from day to day.
The SANGORJ now works for a Rio Tinto venture that wasn't always the case. In the early exploration days, he was on the payroll of another Australian company known as BHP. But the discovery here coincided with the Asian financial crisis. BHP pulled out, Rio Tinto snapped it up, and now everybody has realised just what a huge deposit it is. Do you think that BHP would be kicking themselves now, thinking, I wish we'd done this?
Maybe, maybe.
Some of the more optimistic geologists that we have would say that this business could run for up to 100 years. Those more conservatively say, 50 years plus.
Rio Tinto veteran Cameron McRae cut his teeth in Africa and Bougainville. He's the company's man in Mongolia and is CEO of the Oyu Tolgoi mine, which will eventually have both an open cut and underground component.
The open cut will run at a contained copper grade of 1%. The underground will run at a grade of about 3 times that. Now that means for every tonne... Is that
good, by the way,
yeah,
for someone who doesn't know about mining?
That is good.
When you come to Oyu Tolgoi, you can't help but be struck by the scale of it. And this is only one mine up here. In the coming years, there could be dozens of operations just as big. Miners in countries like Australia must be scratching their heads and wondering how in the future they're going to compete with Mongolia.
Of course, one way not to worry about the rise of Mongolian mining is to become part of it, as many Australian companies are. As a result, Rio Tinto says it's already helping this country significantly. After a boost from this single enterprise, from a mine that's only in the testing and pre-stage stockpiling phase, Mongolia has seen economic growth of between 12 and 17% over recent years. Yet Rio Tinto says it can only pour billions of dollars into constructing an enormous mine in the middle of the desert after it's signed a controversial agreement, giving the company a large controlling stake in the operation, and the Mongolian government only 34%. It's an agreement that's attracted considerable suspicion.
People have different views on that deal. And my feeling is Mongolia made a political decision.
Dorjdari from the Responsible Mining Initiative is pushing for community groups to have access to the detail of all big mining agreements, including that at Oyu Tolgoi.
After all, this deal is a financial transaction, and whether it's really beneficial for Mongolia, I have many doubts about that. And
Why is that?
well, simply because you have on one side of the table Rio Tinto, which has annual revenue far larger than our whole economy. And you have best paid lawyers in the world, basically, who do those sort of deals every year on a regular basis. On the other side of the table, you have a Mongolian government people, and then none of them did such negotiation in the past.
Apart from the ownership question, Rio Tinto was made exempt from a windfall profits tax. The day after the tax was removed, construction started at Oyu Tolgoi.
Just like forcing some country to change its rules just because of one deal, yeah? And in the future you can have like separate legal regimes for hundreds of mines, and how the government is gonna basically manage or supervise everything, yeah.
I think if you're a business and a law that was in place was going to stop you from investing, and if the government was prepared to change that law, I would see that as a win-win situation. Because
of the distance of this mine from, well, everywhere, Machinery, pipelines, and enormous buildings have all had to be constructed. This has cost more than $12 billion. New power lines have been built to bring in electricity from China, and Mongolia's neighbours drove a hard bargain before just agreeing to turn on the switch. But there's one aspect of this mine which is probably its most contentious. Herdsman Shah knows that the most precious commodity in the South Gobi Desert is water. And before the Oyu Tolgoi mine, his animals knew where to find it. We're told that for the moment, the water is plentiful coming out of the new Oyu Tolgoi wells. But this herder has heard rumours. Yet Rio Tinto has told us that the new wells will stay open all year round. Critics of the mine say it's good that the company is providing water to local herders, but they've questioned why it should have control over precious shallow water reserves. Then there's the deep aquifer.
Well, we don't actually know if it recharges, but if it doesn't recharge, then we're only going to draw down on it by 20% in the first 30 years of the operation. And nobody else uses that aquifer, so it's not a shared water resource that others were using at the time of the discovery.
There's no mining without impact on the natural world, and many environmentalists are worried that the extremely remote locations of these mines is meaning less scrutiny.
I'm not going to lose faith in our people, and I do believe our government and the companies, they have the best intentions in their hearts. But again, we do not have the experience really with the mining and a lot of the issues that's actually rising and emerging with it. And we need to learn, and we need to learn fast.
Ono from the Mongol Ecology Centre says the drive to mining is happening so fast that proper checks and balances are not in place. She also worries that mining could endanger another potential big money spinner for Mongolia.
Most of the tourists actually come to Mongolia because they want to see that pristine land. They want to see that open space. They want to see that blue sky. But what if we cannot offer that anymore? And if somebody asks me, what's the most thing that you're proud of, I would say being Mongolian. And that comes with the question, what does it mean? And that means the sky and the mountains and the nature and then the culture and my people.
Yet at the moment, tourist dollars are not speaking as loud as mining dollars. A few hundred kilometres across the Gobi to the west of Oyu Tolgoi is another whopping mine. The Ukakhoduk mine, known as UHG for short, is part of a wider coal deposit that's also one of the biggest in the world. It too is operated by an Australian company, Leighton, but it's owned by Mongolia's Energy Resources, or ER. Overseeing operations here is ER's Sam Bowles.
So at the moment we're feeding about 40,000 tonnes of coal a day. That's roughly a 10 million tonne per annum processing rate. With the third module, we'll increase to about 15 million tonnes per year, so about 60,000 tonnes per day.
That sounds like a lot to me. Is that a lot?
On an international scale, this is a large coal mine.
But there's been something of a slowdown just across the border, which has dampened expectations of what can be achieved here.
Well, as you can see from the padded safety gear, it's pretty cold up here looking down on the UHG pit. But again, the thing that impresses is the size. And nearly 100% of the coal that comes out of this huge hole in the ground is going to just one location, you guessed it, China. And not for electricity generation, this is mostly coking coal, so it's going into steel production. Now, the company here has big plans to expand this operation, but it doesn't want to go too quickly. Instead, they're waiting for Chinese demand for steel to really pick up again. But at the moment, they do look like they're doing a pretty good business as it is.
And mining in Mongolia is not for the faint-hearted. In the middle of winter, it'll hover well below minus 30 degrees Celsius, with snow, ice and wind to deal with.
I mean, you were in Queensland before this. How do you go personally at minus 40?
Oh, look, just rug up, wear the right clothes.
People may joke about it, but the extreme cold is actually a serious safety issue for everyone working here. Staff are on 12-hour shifts. That means at times working right through the night in the middle of a harsh winter. This also makes fatigue a major problem, especially for those driving heavy machinery. It's 6:20 a.m. and a new shift is preparing to come on. This is a regular morning safety meeting, but today there's an important message. Overnight there's been an accident with a driver going to sleep at the wheel. So it's time for a big reminder of just how dangerous fatigue can be. Then it's off for another day of battle at the coalface. Most staff here have had to be trained from scratch, and giving new skills to Mongolians is something the company is trumpeting. They're even helping break down a few gender barriers by giving opportunities to women in a pretty macho society. What's more, the treatment of staff at the Leighton UHG mine is earning praise from would-be critics.
Basically what people are saying, labor standards, like community development for Hahotag are really the example for all other companies, including Rio Tinto, for example, at least in Mongolia.
There's a town next to the mine which was once very sleepy. Lately it seems to have been expanding every day. And when you speak to people here, there seems to be quite a unanimity of views on the impact of mining on the local community.
Мэдээж энэ уул уурхай ингэж хөгжиж, хүн ам төвлөрчиж, энэ олон барилга байгууламж энэ эдийн засаг болон бизнесийн ингээ эргэлтэнд ингээ орж байгаа. Тэгээд давуу тал гэх юм бол мэдээж олон юм байна л да. Онгоцны буудлахтал барилга байгуулагдсан байна. Зам тээвэр ингээ хөгжиж.
And any negative things?
Сөрөг талууд гэвэл байгаа энэ. Гэвэл энэ тоосчлтноос болоод бид нар өөрөө ч гэсэн энгийн одоо эрүүл мэндийн хувьд энгийн бол биш байдлаар нөлөөлдөг.
This is an open-cut mine in an arid, fragile landscape with regular high winds. It does produce quite a bit of dust. In fact, the entire Gobi region is plagued with this problem. Scientists estimate that the dust from here travels to Beijing, Seoul, and even across the Pacific Ocean to the west coast of America. But it's the locals that the mine is probably most worried about alienating.
Leighton and its local partner ER have been sensitive, even paranoid, about us showing too much dust at their site. They've even tried to censor any footage we've taken, which they think makes their coal mine in the middle of the desert appear too dusty. Now, we've not agreed to let them do that, but they're obviously copping some pretty serious flack from somewhere about dust. Well, what do you say to those critics who say that you're actually creating too much dust, not
not by the surrounds, but actually by the mining operation.
Look, we're actively monitoring all areas in our lease to understand the dust that we are generating. There's baseline studies to which we compare current operations, and at present we're definitely in compliance with our requirements.
Leighton says it's as strict here as in Australia, that it's still searching for new ways to water down dust in a climate where the best weapon against it freezes every winter, and that its local partner, ER, has built hundreds of kilometres of sealed road outside the mine to reduce truck-driven dust. Yet the biggest criticism regarding UHG is not really to do with mining, and is levelled at those based far away.
With the problem is again about the issue of fairness and how they got the licenses, because Ulaanbaatar was first explored by the use of state funds, or government budget basically, and then somehow it ended up in the hands of some business people.
Ulaanbaatar is the bustling, chaotic capital of Mongolia. It's known for daily traffic jams on potholed streets. Here, shiny new office towers bulging with mining money sit next to Soviet-era structures. New apartment blocks are going up all over the city, and the talk of the town is mining. Should UHG have been handed over to a private company? Is Rio Tinto paying its fair share? What's really in it for Mongolia? Whether it's true or not, there's also gossip galore about backhanders and corrupt favours being done left, right and centre.
As you might expect, mining policy has become a hot political topic in Mongolia and the source of plenty of debate here in the country's parliament. On the one hand, you've got the government giving out these direct cash handouts to every citizen as a way of saying, see, you're benefiting from the mining boom. On the other, you've got these MPs arguing that the original Oyu Tolgoi agreement was a rip-off for Mongolia and they want the entire thing now renegotiated. Either way, with so much at stake in these big mining deals, the arguments are not going away.
From our perspective, we feel that the investment agreement is something that's been great for Mongolia. We've seen a lot of development. It's been something that the investors have relied on to go forward. And
so it's a bit late to be renegotiating.
Absolutely.
We had arranged to speak to the country's mining minister for this program, but at the last minute he pulled out saying he was too busy. One thing we would have asked is how wide he really expects the benefits of this boom to go. On the outskirts of the capital, hundreds of thousands of people now live in the so-called Gur communities that cover the hills. There's no power or sewerage, and people burn whatever they can for heat. Chansal Dalum is the rather typical mother of a family that's drifted into the capital and set up camp in her tent or gur. Hoping the mining boom will bring job opportunities in the capital, they've abandoned rural life.
Soil, бүхэл юм эхлээл сайхан санагдчихсэн л да. Хотод орж ирэхэд. Тэгэл ажилгүй байхдаа л амар хэцүү байдагс. Ажилгүй болохоор.
However, there are bits of work here, and she's currently making $154 a month. She's going to stick it out in Ulaanbaatar so her children can get a better education. But her most important priorities are paying for food and heating for the winter. She's heard about a boom elsewhere.
Дээгүүрэл ягаад дээгүүрэл тэр хөгжөөд идэм байгаа. Ядуу мадуу хүмүүст бол тийм мэдэгддэггүй шүү дээ. Одоо тэгэл нүүрсэн ч олдохгүй. Юу муу чинь оюутлах амгалгаа чи хөгжиж байгаа л гэжсэн. Тэгээд хаана хөгжөд байгаа мэддэг.
The end of the day for her family is the beginning of the day for this mother. After speaking to us, she heads off into the night, where she'll work through till around 7 a.m. cleaning dishes in a restaurant. And each new dawn brings many more like her to the capital. Mongolia has some huge decisions to make in terms of what type of country it wants to be. Many say it's a mining future or bust, but others are holding out to see if extra government revenue actually leads to better infrastructure. Pollution, corruption, and a gaping wealth divide are all major concerns. But even the poorest here can be pretty optimistic. Chansal Dolum and her children take part in a ritual that's been played out for centuries in Mongolia. Soldiers once left a stone before going off to war, and they'd collect it when they returned, giving an idea of the losses in battle. These days, people place stones, hoping for good fortune in the future. It's a pile that's getting higher and higher.